Hi everyone, welcome to Backstage with Blur the Border, a weekly podcast where we dive into the world of stylists. Vinita does it all. She's a fashion stylist, a creative director, and an editor. She's worked at one of the leading fashion magazines in India for 8 years and has created some truly compelling visual narratives. Today, Vinita styles and art directs digital campaigns, commercial shoots, fashion weeks, and so much more. When she isn't busy being a master of the craft, she spends her time documenting Indian textiles. Her love for Indian textiles is palpable through her consistent commitment to writing about them and spotlighting our craftsmanship to a larger audience. We are so excited to host Vinita on the show. Vinita, welcome.
Hi.
Hi. I'm very excited to talk to you today.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, so Vinita, I want to talk to you about your origin story. Can you talk to me about your early days as a fashion stylist and how you got
to where
inducted into this world?
So I went to college to study mass media, which is the most popular course at the time that I was trying to get into the arts. I always knew I wanted to work at magazines, so the path was pretty clear. I studied and majored in journalism, and I initially thought I would write more about fashion. But as I was inching towards my graduation and then I was looking for jobs, I think I was very interested in telling stories in a 360-degree sort of way, which was that I had full control over the narrative or how it came out. It's also the fallacy of youth, where you think you have so much control, but you start out. So anyway, it was also recession the year that I graduated. So magazines were sort of looking to find cheaper resources, give them more work, let you sort of go, take on more than you were probably even capable of. But it kind of worked out in my favor. So I had a job at a smaller magazine where it was called Fashion Coordinator. And I was so young, I was like probably 20 years or 21 years old. And I could write, I could style, I could coordinate and call in stuff for shoots as well. And that really just kind of gave me the opening to sort of actually make a portfolio, because I was very clear that I didn't want to study design. For in my youth, in this, young brain, I still understood the concept of waste, and I felt like I didn't want to create more physical things, but just sort of create from what is already available. I didn't know at the time it's called styling, and I sort of learned over the years, because I didn't come from a fashion sort of training where I worked with textiles or design or any of that. So anyway, and then one job led to another proper fashion magazine job where I spent 8 years, all of my 20s.
Wow.
And now here I am.
Yeah, here you are. You're a creative director and an artistic director. I think a lot of people are very confused when they see a stylist take on those roles. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Of course. I think creative director is a term that most people who sort of work in advertising agencies are sort of familiar with. But actually, if you work in magazines, which are, apart from what they look outside, they are smaller teams. Especially if you work in magazines that are not legacy titles, you definitely take on more roles than you sort of signed up for, just simply because there is no one available to do it. And, if you want to tell the story and if you want to get a shoot that month, you want to build a portfolio, you will very well do the job. So I think it's just, if you think about it, even you, Surbi, you've worked at many magazines as well. When we style, the concept always comes from us.
Yes.
Who the team should be is generally our idea, unless there are advertising budgets to consider or relationships to consider. We build the team. It's our concept. We know which designers to source from, who we want to kind of book to do the makeup. So we've always done the job. I think we're finally getting credit for it, and we finally have a term for it, and fashion is now adopting the title. But truly, we've always been stylists and creative directors.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you found your voice and your visual language?
I think I only found it once I quit my full-time job. Once I went independent. It's been about 5 years. I think it's also a little bit to do with age. When I quit, I just turned 30.
Yeah.
And then there is the whole soul searching and what am I doing with my life? Yeah. I started traveling a bit. I think when you're so burnt out with a full-time job, there is very little time to think, is there a connection to my work? I think I always like to read Dayanita Singh, who's a prolific photographer from India. And she says that it's only later on in your life when you open out your book, does it start making sense what the story is. It's probably not so much when you first start working out. And there are so many nuances as to why that doesn't happen. But it's only later on, you start opening your book and you see there's a connection from... For example, I have been shooting with textiles since 2013, and it's only now in 2023 when I have some sort of voice about it in the editorial market, which is not something that was there 10 years ago.
Why do you think that is?
I think everyone's now open to the story more than just the product. Of course, the pandemic helped because the exports and the imports were shut and, we had to buy local. There was so much realignment in how we shop, why we're shopping, how much we're shopping. And fashion has always said something about you, right? Like if you wear denims, then it says you're casual. If you dress up, then it says that you care about your opinion, what others think of you. So I think it's the story that people buy into, and everybody now wants to know, where has the fabric come from? Are they supporting someone? It's cerebral, I think so.
It's definitely cerebral.
Yeah.
Vinita, you've been traveling extensively and you've been on this path of discovery when it comes to Indian textiles. Can you tell us a little bit more about the trips that you've taken recently and what those experiences have been like?
Oh, so many. It's I was just thinking, I now only have maybe some northeastern states remaining, but I've pretty much covered a lot already. I've always been traveling for a long time, even on my own. But I think it really started out with, shout out to Butul, who used to work at a magazine at the time, who was a fashion features editor. And she sort of sent me on a trip to Lucknow with Fab India. They had invited me to sort of come and see the crafts at the base level where the women sort of sit and embroider it by themselves.
What year was this?
I think it was 2007, 18, I think so, or 19.
5 years.
I can't remember. Yeah. It was 5 years ago. And I had been talking about the crafts on my Instagram in any case, which is perhaps, why Fab India also kind of knew that I was working on this on my own. So they took a bunch of us to see where they embroider there, because they have a chicken curry collection that comes out every year. So for them, it's a big sector, and they wanted us to come see and see where the crafts really is originating, the story behind it, how do they translate it for their audience, which may or may not want to, spend that much on the craft. So, and that's the first time I realized that these stories that I've been sharing on my Instagram or on my social media actually has space on the pages of a magazine, because when I was working there, we weren't talking about Indian crafts in this way. While we were always using Indian designers, I don't remember us using or doing stories that were craft based.
It was always craft with the context of a designer. Yeah.
But not pure craft stories.
For the sake of craft.
But even with designers, I don't ever remember crediting a jacket with saying Zardozi embroidered jacket. It would always be black jacket or power shouldered jacket. You know that, right? Like when we write credits for magazines. And now it's all like Banarsi sari, but first it would be golden bordered or like red colored. It was color based. We didn't really ever give credit to what it was. But now, we actually even give credit to the maker. So you'll very often see in my stories, the artisan is named as well. And the artisan sort of finds space right next to the designers. And that's been lovely to be able to do.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the trip that you took for the G20 summit and the exhibits that they had based on craft?
So originally we wanted to see Ashish Shah, the architect and the artist, his works on the thumbs, which is the pillars that we find in some of the oldest temples and houses in our country. And these were modern iterations of that.
I can't wait to see this.
And so they'll I mean, hopefully it'll be a traveling show, but it's open to public. So I urge a lot more people to go to Orissa to see it. Orissa is such a beautiful state. It's where our current president comes from as well. So that's nice to have that context to go and see some of the saris she wears all the time. That crafts museum, that scale is just stellar. It's not something I've seen somewhere else.
And the fact that it's not in a metro city.
I think that's what some of these crafts exhibits are now trying to do. They're trying to invite people to come see what's happening in the rest of the country apart from Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, and there's so much. And if I were not traveling for these things, I don't know how I would have been able to find all this. So it's nice to also visit any state with this context. It's a lot of fun. And if you find a way to make it more contemporary, then, like, for example, when I went to the museum, I saw a sari that Vidya Balan had worn. And this is not something, if I wasn't following fashion, I would just be like, oh, this is a cute sari with math equation on it. but actually, it's a sari that Vidya Balan wore.
Yeah.
And it's nice to connect it back to fashion. And that's a really beautiful thing about India. Like, our fashion is interconnected to its textiles. So that story is actually one and the same. It's not too different. So it's been really easy to actually connect what I do, which is primarily fashion, with textiles, because the equation is symbiotic. It's one and the same.
Yeah. And have you seen a clear influence on how you style now versus 5 years ago?
Absolutely. And the trips have had that.
Yeah.
Like, had I not taken these trips to see how things are made, I think it gives me context of why it's special. Like, for example, when I was in a magazine, Apparel used to send us clothes in fabric cloths. Or I remember when Swati Kalsi once sent me a jacket for a shoot, I had to understand why it was museum quality and I could not store it with the rest of the clothes and why it was that expensive. I think as stylists, we're so busy. Sometimes the clothes on our rack are all piled as one because they're just looks for somebody or a shoot or whatever. But once you start traveling and you're seeing how these are made, why they are made, who's making them, it just, I think, puts so much reverence into your work. It gives you this reverence for which country we belong to. And, no other country in the world has our craft legacy. If you probably went to Japan and tried to do a batik, you'd probably have to sell a limb or something,
Yeah.
But in India, you just call somebody, and now they're all on Instagram, right? And you call them and say, I want a sample for something, and you'll get it. And I think just having discovered what we have here, rediscovered what we have here, it's changed everything about how I do anything at all. How I write, how I style, how I creatively direct. It's all changed.
No, and there is a very clear evolution in the way that you put out your work as well. What do you hope people take away from the exposure you're giving to Indian craft and textile?
I think my biggest pet peeve is people should stop saying that they are supporting the artisans.
Yeah.
There's this whole language, support the artisans by buying from them. I'm like, unless you're one of the first families of India, you're not supporting anyone. You're simply buying into what they are selling and you're lucky enough to have it. We're not supporting anybody, but I hope that people, stop looking at it as like a charity or as something you buy one thing. I think handloom is quite sexy. It can be. And that's why the designer intervention is needed.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad so many designers are now talking about their processes. I must admit and say that designers have always worked with them. We just didn't know about it.
Yeah. The consumer awareness has grown.
Yes.
And it just needs to be on that trajectory.
Yeah, correct. We just didn't know about it. I also only learned about all of this now.
Yeah, that's true. So we're going to move on into the next segment of our podcast, and this is a little bit of an industry deep dive. I wanted to talk to you specifically about the independent creators. We're constantly pitching ideas to different brands or in different realms of the industry. How are these ideas important? Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
I think as freelancers, as independent creators, our ideas are our currency. Apart from the fee that we get, we all know that the market is competitive, right? There's so many of us now, and so many of us have gone independent since the death of magazines. But,
it's so sad though.
It is sad. So many of us are in the market. So many of our references are the same. So many of our, starting points are the same. So what gets you the job is your idea. Like, if it's better than all the other ones, if you're able to execute it, how are you able to stand out in the market from the other freelancers or the other creators that, it's the first thing that puts your foot into the door.
Yeah.
After that, it's how well you do a job. But if you didn't have the idea, so I think it's really problematic, like I've seen that so many times. I'll just say something random on my Instagram story, and I like the next third day, like, there's a whole story on it by another writer. Or I'll see that I've sent something to a brand or a magazine and it probably didn't get picked up, but somebody else has done it. And I know that you also have gone through it, and so have a lot of other stylists or writers.
Yeah.
And we can be philosophical about it and say that, you can copy me, but you can never have my vision. But, it bothers you.
It for sure bothers you, but also, I feel like this industry is not regulated. In more regulated industries, there are IP laws.
Correct.
Right? You and I were talking about this off record, and you basically opened my eyes to charging pitching fees to people.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
It's been a lesson. I think that what happens is that, and this is something I didn't know either. This is something my advertising friends have told me about.
Oh my God.
That sometimes when they invite agencies to come and pitch, they charge them like fees.
Yeah.
Not all, but some do. And also I think with some senior creatives, I do know that even to just send in their ideas deck, there is a small amount. I don't think it's very large, but there is a small fee attached to it.
Yeah.
Because, you never know, unless we're now signing NDAs with everyone and everything, which is also an expensive affair.
It is. It's very expensive.
Exactly. But I think it's time that we do take this seriously. I think that, when we sit together, and for some of us, when ideas are just like flowing, we just say whatever we want in front of whomever without realizing that someone's always making notes.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to maybe get a little bit more organized about this. So, I think that once you reach a certain level, or if it's a brand you have not approached, I think it's fair enough to say I'm going to be charging a fee to send you my ideas, which can be waived off if I do go ahead on this project with you. If you want
integrate
to.
that.
Yeah, you integrate that. But if they don't go ahead with you for whatever reason, then you at least, you've got your time's worth. Because, when we make our decks, it's not a 1-hour job. So that Picasso story, right? Like a woman approaches Picasso in a restaurant and says, can you do something for me on a tissue? And I'll be happy to pay whatever you want. And then he does it in 30 seconds and he says, I want $10,000 for it. And she's like, you made this in like 30 seconds. And he's like, no, actually, it took me 40 years to make this in 30 seconds. And not that I'm comparing us to Picasso or anything in the same zip code, but it's the same with all artists. Like in my case, I started 15 years ago. So what you're really charging someone is your expertise and is your problem solving capacity. Because when you go on set, everything that can go wrong does go wrong.
100%. All the time.
At all times.
Yeah.
And it's my experience of 15 years that helps me troubleshoot and problem solve. And so I'm really charging for my experience and my time, and not just that one day of shoot that you've booked me for.
Exactly.
So I feel like there needs to be some respect to what we bring.
So I also want to talk to you about how, the general population, and sometimes creators in the industry included, have the mindset where we're looking to the West for inspiration. But like you said, India has a rich history of craftsmanship and textiles, and things are changing in this area now. What more do you think needs to happen for the industry to push the craftsmanship and textile conversation forward?
I think that the industry right now is still treating it as if it's a trend. But I've always said that it's a symbiotic relationship. We wouldn't be able to run our industry without our textile sector or the fabrics it provides us and the rest of the world. I think we've seen that with Dior right now. And, I think it's, by the way, the newest Beyonce look that she wore on her Renaissance tour, that was also embroidered in India.
But also, it's not the first time she's worn things that have been embroidered here.
Absolutely
she's been
not.
doing that over the course of her career for many years.
Yeah, and not just her. She probably doesn't know about it.
Yeah,
and and not just her. I mean, it's pretty much everyone. Like, it's impossible. Like, for example, designers like Dries Van Noten openly credit us. The House of Dior always has.
Mm-hmm.
But, interestingly enough, like when we used to shop in Sarojini Nagar or at fashion streets, I have seen so many brands, their samples being sold off, or probably like a reject pile or something finds its way to these markets. Not as much anymore because of the regulation.
Yeah.
But when we just started out, like we'd find, like, for example, I once found a Yoji piece at Sarojini Nagar.
Yeah.
And that's something like you'll never ever see. I mean, I can't remember the last time I also went there, but it was so interesting to see that. And like, I remember once I got a courier for a shoot from an international brand, and I could see on the courier slip where I was signing off how many embroidery ateliers exist here and the brands next to it that was sending the couriers to them. So I think that it's always existed. We're just coming to know now, and this should continue.
Mm-hmm.
We should perhaps talk more openly about it, and it's on us as journalists, as stylists, to credit it on our social media as well, who's made it, maybe the ateliers as well.
I think not just credit, but I think context is also so much more important. For example, there's celebrities walking the Cannes red carpet.
Correct.
And it's not just the designer that's made their outfit, for somebody to have context on an international level.
Correct.
About what that piece is, what type of embroidery it is, what is it native to, how many millennia or centuries does it go back to? Just
true.
To have that kind of context and education is so important.
I mean, I think that comes down to probably then the stylist to, let the actors know what they're wearing and sort of talk about it when we get credit. Or maybe, like I said, I think Instagram is such a good way to sort of and it's a lot of people are coming and reading there, so I think it's nice to probably mention there who made it, how long it took, all of those things.
The article that you wrote about the MS Blue sari is so interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about this little nugget of history?
We think that we're only the creative industries fighting for credit, but you'll be surprised how many even textile-based brands are fighting on credits or, saying we started it. That's the thing. We have a lack of documentation of pieces made in our country. I think some of the private museums are now beginning to do it. I've heard that a lot of senior designers are now archiving their collections. But I think with MS Blue, it's the power of celebrity. Like, we still call it the Mumtaz sari because of the 3 drapes that she did. So it's a nice, peacock sort of blue that she came to wear a lot. I think she probably found it lucky, or I don't know what it was, but she wore it a lot on all her events and all her photos, and the people who made it for her started calling it the MS Blue sari. They started selling it like that. But from what I know, like a couple of brands take credit for it. It's not just one. And who knows?
How many others?
Who knows? But that's the power of celebrity. They can make anything famous. Like, for example, the choli blouse, the sexy blouse, I think I would credit it probably to Manish Malhotra. Like, he got it into mainstream Bollywood, and all our Desi girls have sort of...
He is definitely one of the originals, isn't he?
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is that he's also a stylist.
He is... Yeah, exactly. And there's so many times now when we look to the West, we're seeing people like Tom Ford work in movies and craft their costume.
Correct.
But it's been going on forever over here.
Yeah, but that's the thing. The stylist didn't exist in the context of a movie. It's always been the costume design.
Yeah.
But now it's blurring the borders.
That's a nice little segue into our next segment, which is all about homegrown brands. I want to talk to you about all of the brands in these particular categories, especially because of all of this knowledge that you have about craft and textiles. It's going to be a rapid fire. So we have to begin with textiles. Which are some of your favorite homegrown labels that focus on Indian textiles in a modern way?
I wouldn't know where to begin. There are so many. But I would say I love what Gaurav Jai Gupta is doing with Akaro. He makes this extremely original metal blend sari, which is malleable, but at the same time looks like metal wires, literally.
Yeah.
I like Studio Medium. What she's doing, she makes the hands-free sari.
I know, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful, and her play on bandhani and of course, batik, and
I want to own one of her pieces. It's my thing.
She's so lovely. I mean, who would have thought of hands-free sari? I like
only a woman.
Only a woman.
Yeah.
And I always say whatever men can do, women can do better, and in a sari.
Yep. 100%.
And I like what Roka, that's Shriji Jivan from Kerala, is doing with the kasavu. I'd never seen a black kasavu before he sort of made it. And they're so well priced. They're so easy. Our weather is close to the south. So, in Bombay, you want something that's lightweight and that's cotton. I can go on and on about raw mango. Sanjay has done a lot for the sari. I mean, mushroom wasn't even considered a textile for saris until he did that collection.
Yeah.
But my favorite from him is, again, the Suti. It's the softest cotton I've ever sort of experienced. So, yeah, I'm just beginning. I love what Tilfi is doing in Banaras. It's just endless. There's just endless inspiration.
There is also this sort of notion that Indian textile is only good for traditional silhouettes.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your ready-to-wear silhouettes.
Actually, I really like Savio John from Goa.
Good.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen him at a fashion week, but I just visited his studio in Goa, and it's so interesting that he's working with some locally made fabrics in silhouettes that are so sexy, so complicated to understand, and so beautiful to wear. I hope he comes back in a big way. I really would like to see more people wearing him. I've always said I love what Jodi does. They work with block prints, and I don't think anybody's been able to make block printing so contemporary, so sexy. I love what they do with their silhouettes. You'll never think that it's a craft-based brand simply because, and of course, Gauri and Karuna are stylists. So
with an editorial background.
Yes.
I feel like we must claim them as our own.
Yes. So it makes sense why it looks the way it does.
Yeah.
I absolutely love what Himanshu's doing with 1111. He's given bandhani a completely new flavor. There is Yam, who also works with block print. And it's so cute, and it's so wearable, and it's accessible.
Fabrics are really nice.
And Inka, Amit Hansraj. I think there's so much value in starting a brand once you've already worked in the industry for a while, which is what Amit did with Inka. He's been around for a long time, almost 2 decades, working with other brands, consulting with other designers. And I think what he's done with Inka is so original. The fabrics are like butter. They work in all seasons. They can be worn with jeans, but then they can be worn as sexy kaftans. And I think that he's really going to change an aesthetic. And I love that. I love that for us.
Yeah. What are your favorite jewelry brands?
Oh, I'm an Amrapali girl. I love Shop Loon as well. Loon is what it is. Otherwise, I still think that a nice way to shop is probably to go into our markets. There's a lot that is there.
Yeah, that's true.
I think what happens is that, because our weather is such that we lose the sheen on a lot of our pieces. And that's something I don't think a lot of brands have been able to crack.
What are your favorite shoe brands?
I don't think India has cracked that. I don't think we have it.
This has been a very recurring response to this question.
We don't have one. There's nothing. I think, but a good thing to do is to go to Dharavi. And I do that for some of my commercial shoots, is that you can actually get a boot made, you can get a mule made. I mean, basically, that's what I'm actually stressing on. I think we're sitting on a gold mine here. Even in main cities, you can get them done. I think Agra is a great market to buy local shoes because they manufacture there for a lot of international brands. So there is that. Okay, I actually want to say that I do like an Indian brand, and that's Soul Sisters.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she makes kolhapuris. I'm wearing them right now. But, you think, why should I buy kolhapuri at that premium price when it's available on all street stores? But it's how she cuts it. It's the material and it's the colors.
Yeah.
And so that's the brand from India I do like.
Okay. How about beauty? I know you're into that.
I'm into beauty. I again think that hair care, no one. But if I had to say, I love, love, love Kama Ayurveda. I'm a fan. I've bought a lot. It's effective. And I think I'm more into skincare from Indian brands rather than beauty. But I also really like this brand called Daughter Earth. They have these lovely pigment pots.
Yeah, so cute.
And they stay forever. They smell great.
Yeah.
That one, yeah.
Nice. Okay. What excites you the most about the future of homegrown brands?
I think that when we think about Indian artisanal or karigars, or it's always in the prospect of couture, but the capacity is larger than that. The possibility is larger than couture. Like, for example, we could have an Indian Muji.
Yeah.
Where is that? We have all the fabrics for it.
We do.
Maybe I'll begin one. But where's the Indian Muji, or where's an Indian high street store that's made the rounds in the world? We can have that. We have the production capacity. We have the textile capacity. Yeah, so I think I'm excited to see us go mainstream and not just focus so much on embroidery and couture, but also on what we can offer that is larger than that in a large scale. That's something I'm very excited to see happen for us.
Right. That would actually be really interesting.
Yeah. We don't have a high street store. We don't have an Indian
We do have the label Ritu Kumar's and by Anita Dongre.
Yes.
But I feel like the younger generation doesn't find it very relatable.
They don't. And I think that in some ways they still continue to
aspire to the Zaras and H&Ms.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of them are still craft focused, although some of those are prints and not actual crafts. And that's a debate for another time.
Yeah.
But, I don't think we have that. So it would be nice to kind of see, like, for example, I love what Uniqlo does. It can't be categorized as high street because of the fabrics that they sort of use. It's not necessarily sustainable all the time, but it's how much they create, which is just enough.
Yeah.
It's what they do with their silhouettes, with their brands. I would love to see what India can do and take to the world in that capacity.
Who do you think would be able to do that best from our current set? Because I know there's so many.
I really hope it's somebody young and upcoming, because it needs a vision that comes from optimism. It needs a little delirious optimism.
It really does, doesn't it?
I think that it needs a little bit of reckless abandon to say it can happen. So maybe somebody young and upcoming.
Yeah. So, there is also the problem of price points, how very few Indian designers have been able to capture an audience at a very affordable rate. But a lot of the times when you go to buy something from, niche Indian designers, things are quite aspirationally priced.
Yes. I think that's a problem of scale because, it is handwork. It does go at a slower level.
Yeah.
But I think Fab India has proven very well that scale can be achieved. Like if you go to Sanganair, where they do the block printing for international brands, they produce 50,000 pieces in cotton, hand block printed a week. That's insane scale. And I think that India doesn't have an issue of scale. It can scale up if it wants to. The question is, but it's handwork. So it's never going to follow a template, and not every piece is going to look like the other. And when it comes to quality control, they may not always pass in, so to say, traditional terms.
Yeah.
But if anybody who understands what this work is, will know that's the beauty of it.
Exactly.
That each piece is so unique.
Yeah. we're going to move on into the final segment of our podcast, which is an AMA and includes questions from the Blur the Border team. Okay, so the first question is, as a creative director, how do you stay inspired? What are your go-to sources of inspiration?
Oh, I wish I could say that I don't live on the internet and that I don't have those really embarrassing timeline hours on my phone.
Gosh,
I definitely live on the internet, but I would say that I have friend circles outside of the job. I find a lot of my references from old movies, books, old pictures from my family, and
that's a big one for me as well.
Yeah, there's so much. I think that when I first started traveling for textiles, it was just I was just so burnt out. I was just so saturated of, referring to magazines. I think it started out to just get inspired at base level. So I think travel is a big one for me. There's always ideas coming into my head when I'm on the flight. Yeah. And so I like to travel alone. That's one of the reasons I do that. Other people outside of the fashion industry on Instagram, like food is a big one for me. It's huge. I'm hugely interested in it. Also having a huge India moment, by the way. And I love to see indigenous tribal fashion, their textiles. There's always something from that, especially for me, because my stories are so Indian focused.
Yeah.
So it's a huge point of inspiration for me.
The next question is, what are your thoughts on the growing influence of social media in the fashion industry and how does it impact your work as a creator?
Oh God, we love to hate Instagram, and where would we without it? It's made fashion so democratic.
Yeah.
We're our own publishers. But at the same time, it's just, we don't know the impact of it really. Like, we haven't studied it for as long as we've studied some of the other vices.
Yeah.
So we don't know in 30, 40 years what it's going to do to our brain to have this much information coming to us at all time. So
it's definitely overwhelming. And I think in the last 10 years, we've also seen the effect that overconsumption has had.
Yes.
And not just overconsumption of like data, media, etc., but just it's had a direct impact on how we're consuming products around us.
I think all of us are always also talking about how many of us are dealing with anxiety. And I think a lot of it does come from the amount of screen time. I mean, our work is online, right? Like our campaigns are for digital. Yeah. So how could we not be online? It's a necessary evil.
It is a necessary evil, but I don't know how to evaluate my work and separate it from that medium anymore. And it's so difficult because when I started out, when I was studying fashion, it wasn't something that existed or something that I needed to like necessarily pay too much attention to. But now here we are.
And I think it's changed a lot, right? So I think for me also, it's because I'm interested in textiles. There are opportunities to sort of take it on ground where, you lead tours or you basically organize curated tours of museums. And I think going forward, and something I have been doing is spending inspiration time outside of my phone screen because I need it. And I find that that's a good way to sort of do the work that needs to be done online and then also find ways to fulfill yourself outside. Yeah. That's, time with friends, time on holidays, not discussing work, and also finding new ways to be inspired by work which is not on the screen. Like I said, museums are big for me. Yeah, and India now has so many museums coming up. There's KNMA, the Odisha one I just went to, and of course we have our own NMACC in Bombay.
It's a long time coming.
That's a big one actually. I'm really excited about it. So I think that we finally actually have these opportunities to go back on ground and get inspired by actual people watching, see the artwork.
Yeah.
We've never had so much access before. Yeah. So I think we're good.
Thank you for that. That was very important. And that's a wrap on our conversation. Vinita, thank you so much.
Thank you, Surbhi. See you at some shoot.
Yeah, or an event. And that was our conversation with Vinita. I personally learned so much from that chat, and I hope you've enjoyed that as well and had a lot of takeaways like I did. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on your favorite streaming platform. We'll be back next week. Until then, I'm your host, Surbhi Shukla.